welcome to Know Your Foe. This week, we got JT Wistrcill from Locked On Utes. JT, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be on with you, Saul. Really excited about this matchup this weekend.
I said us like there's another person in the room. I meant me, of course. But, listen, I think I know the U of A Wildcats could have used a lot more us on the field against Kansas State. They've had a week off. They're about to face you guys this week. Obviously, you guys coming off a big win in Stillwater against Oklahoma State. A lot of good. Some things that could be brushed up in your case on that side of the ball. Especially when you're talking about Isaac Wilson. Let's start there because obviously we have no idea if Cam Rising is going to play. It feels like it's a flavor of the week situation. It's almost like they know the answer. They're just going to keep giving you the guessing game week after week. Is it frustrating for you as a Utes fan to hear that you don't know if he's going to play or not?
Frustrating only begins to describe this Cam Rising saga. I mean, let's go back to last season and all of the episodes I published. Everyone in Salt Lake, the media, all we've done around is Cam Rising going to play. The week after week of Kyle Whittingham always going to play. I was at the UCLA game last year when Cam Rising's in pads warming up and he still doesn't play. He doesn't play at all the whole season. And now here we are, totally separate injury. He got thrown into a Gatorade cart against Baylor and cut his hand. So he had to get stitches on it. And Utah's best wide receiver, Dorian Singer, who you guys are very familiar with, obviously, said Cam is going to play against Oklahoma State. And Brett McMurphy even said Cam is trending towards playing. Oh, there you go. He's going to play. He's going to play. Nope, Isaac Wilson. It's beyond frustrating. And Kyle Whittingham I've heard from many people close to him, he is the ultimate competitor. So even that slight advantage he gets by not having teams know who QB is, he's going to use that and exploit it. I expect it to be Wilson this week. I am done saying it's going to be Cam Rising until it actually is Cam Rising who's taking snaps on the field. I think it will be Wilson. And I thought Utah proved last week they can successfully move the ball with Wilson under center.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's a few differences, just being an objective observer of the game last week. I thought Oklahoma State, if they could find any offense at all, now that's a credit to your defense, obviously, but they were so inconsistent. Obviously you guys held up very well against the run and holding Ollie Gordon to less than 50 yards rushing, which is remarkable. But I did feel like on the offensive side, there was a little bit of good and bad with Isaac Wilson. He had, there was one series towards the end of the first half where he had a long run down the sideline, and then a couple plays later, interception. And that's kind of the ups and downs. Are you worried in terms of matching up against a team that might have a legitimate offense on the other side of the ball in terms of how you guys might hold up? And I'm not even saying that Arizona right now because I don't feel like they are a smooth machine on the offensive side of the ball. I'm just saying, just in general, is that ever a concern?
That could definitely be a concern with this Utah team. You mentioned the differences between Cam Rising. Let's start out with the fact that Isaac Wilson is a true freshman. Cam Rising is 25 years old. I mean, so the difference in college football and experiences they've played, like this time last year, Isaac Wilson was leading his high school football team. So the fact that he is now in these massive matchups is a big thing. But I do feel like if you look at the very first snaps he took in Utah's first game against Southern Utah to the Oklahoma State game, he showed immense growth. And obviously I expect this week for him to be the guy. So he's getting the practice reps, continuing to grow, continue to elevate. And I do think that this is a Utah team that I think is one of the best teams in the country. I think they're clearly shown they're the best team in the Big 12 from a consistency standpoint so far. And I think Arizona I like a lot of things I like two things really about Arizona offensively, right? I think Noah Fifita is one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. I think NUTRL McMillan might be the best wide receiver, right? Him, Luther Burden, whoever you want to take in that kind of group. But unfortunately, I do think this is a bad matchup for the Wildcats for Utah because I do feel like you guys are one-dimensional right now. You did not have a lot of success running against Kansas State, and this is a Utah team that, like you mentioned, didn't just shut down Ollie Gordon. They have just really done a great job on the ground. They had a top 5 run defense from a year ago. They only lost their NFL defensive end. Still a loss, right? Van Fillinger, one of their defensive ends already, is tied for the nation lead in sacks. They replaced that production really well. It's a deep group of defensive tackles. DNs are deep. Linebackers play really well. And I just feel like they're going to be able to win those one-on-one matchups against a Wildcat front that hasn't passed the test to me yet, right? You struggled against Northern Arizona a little bit. My brother goes to Northern Arizona, so shout out the Lumberjacks. But that was a game where it didn't quite work out. Then you look at the game against Kansas State. I saw a lot of concerns there, and I feel like Utah has the defensive backs where it's going to be like, okay, we can hold up one-on-one against these other guys. And I'm not letting NUTRL McMillan operate one-on-one. I think they're going to be able to get pressure on Fifita, and it's really hard to win in Salt Lake City. I also think that's important to mention. Since 2019, only Bo Nix's Oregon team from last year came into Salt Lake and beat Utah. And even that was with a backup quarterback. Now, it was a really good Oregon team. They might have won if Cam Rising played, but that's just the reality of the situation. It's hard to win in Salt Lake City. And I don't think I've seen enough from Arizona quite yet to expect them to be able to go in and get that win.
Yeah, I listen. I tend to agree with you right now,
Mhm.
just because of the inconsistency that Arizona has shown. Like week 1, they put up 60 plus points, and then the following 2 weeks they combined for less than 30 total, and it's been all over the place. So I would agree with you in terms of the inconsistency. However, let's go to the other. Let's just go to the what if game, because that's what we got to do here. If Arizona is able to throw and get the ball in the air quite a bit, I do think that there's a potential opportunity to be able to stay in the game, and really be able to score at a high level if Noah Fafita is able to get everybody involved. Kansas State did something kind of unique, and Chris Kleiman talked about how they basically wanted to keep T-Mac in front of them, but let him get his, and force Arizona basically to have to throw the ball to T-Mac 50 times in order to beat them, and methodically move down the field. And Arizona, obviously, it's not in your nature to force the ball 50 plus times to one individual, right? It's just, but I do wonder, maybe at some point Arizona's like, you know what, if it's not broke, we just got to keep going to it until they stop it. And I kind of wonder if Utah's going to take a page out of K-State's book and kind of attack Arizona the same way, or if they decide that they just want to try and eliminate everybody completely, and what is that going to free up on the other side?
Point, because look, you guys do have, like we said, McMillan is a fantastic receiver. I do think your receivers, just like we saw at the end of the Oklahoma State game, will make plays against Utah downfield. I expect you to score, even though I think Utah's defense is better than Kansas State. I expect you guys to score more than 7 points in this game. I think you will move the ball, and I'm curious to see how it works in the red zone against just a stout Utah defense that has a consistent history of producing NFL defensive backs, and I think they have a few more on their roster this year. I look at Morgan Scalley. He's a fantastic defensive coordinator, right? Utah was 3-0 against Caleb Williams, really because of what Morgan Scalley was able to do. And I just feel like this Utah team is going to try their best to shut down McMillan. I think that maybe they will copy the blueprint of what worked and be like, hey, we'll let him have his and we'll take away everyone else. But it feels like they're going to want to do their best to try and contain him. But look, if you're talking about Arizona's path to victory, I think it is, Isaac Wilson still feeling it out there and making some mistakes through the air. I think it is Noah Fafita putting on the suit. Anytime you have the best quarterback in the game, and there is no doubt who has the best quarterback in this game, it is absolutely, even if Cam Rising's healthy, or healthy quotations, it doesn't matter. Noah Fafita is the best quarterback on the field. Can also argue that Tetairoa McMillan is the best player on the field. So anytime you have that, you have a chance. But it's just hard when you're dealing with a complete team like Utah has. I mentioned there's a reason that this team went into Oklahoma State, and that offense the Cowboys had didn't look that bad the first few weeks of the season, but then they ran into Utah, and Utah really made life difficult on them. So I do think Arizona is capable of hanging around because of some of the players they had. Just based on what I've seen in some of the recent weeks, I just have concern if you're struggling to run the ball against Kansas State, against an even better front seven. And, for Utah, obviously Kansas State had a bunch of success running, and a lot of that was with Avery Johnson, but Wilson, not as good of a running quarterback, can scramble when opportunities present themselves. But I think this Utah offensive line is really good. Mekhi Bernard, Utah's running back, 6th in the nation. He leads all Big 12 running backs in rushing yards. So he's been a big revelation too. This is a legitimate top 10 team going into their building. It's really hard to win there. If you guys were rolling and looking like the top 20 team that I expected Arizona to be by the time this matchup came up, like you played Kansas State close, I think that's where I'd be a little more nervous from a Utah perspective. But I just think it's a matchup that does play into Utah's hands. But don't get me wrong, Utah has the full respect of Arizona for what happened last year, and they know how talented Noah Fafita and Tetairoa McMillan are.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because the inconsistency of this series has been widely a home and home series. When Utah, even going all the way back to 2015-16, when Utah was on a roll and they were a much better team than Arizona was, and Arizona was fighting just to get bowl eligible, somehow, some way, found a way to win at home with Nate Phillips catching the ball in that end zone, and you're just like, how did they even beat this team? It doesn't even make sense. And then last year, just a complete obliteration at home, which was really remarkable considering what kind of program Utah is. When you look at this matchup, I think there's two things that I feel like are that stand out the most. One of them is, I just don't know how Arizona is going to hold up against the run, like you just mentioned. They had trouble with K-State. Now, K-State's a little bit of a different kind of running game than what you guys have. But Wilson did show that he could use his legs. He busted out for a 52-yard run last week, as I just mentioned. And then the bye week. And we all know that sometimes with new coaching staffs, you get into it and it's just – things are moving too fast to make too many adjustments. With the bye week in between, two kind of similar programs in terms of consistency and running game, I do wonder what kind of adjustments Dwayne Aquina is going to make to try and attack Isaac Wilson and Micah Bernard to try and limit the effectiveness of both.
I find the bye week angle fascinating because it can be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. Let's look at it from Utah's perspective. Karene Reed, I don't expect him to play. He's missed a couple weeks now. He's one of Utah's other best linebackers next to Lander Barton. Utah's top, Van has been their top pass rusher this year. There's another guy, Connor O'Toole, I think is more of an explosive edge rusher. Van has been winning off of more strength. He will be out of this game as well. And obviously still Cam Rising being banged up. So I do expect Utah to be without those three, who are maybe three of their 10 to 15 best players still. And we know how good Cam Rising is. So that's where it could hurt Utah. But you also make a point too about, like, do you correct too much during the bye week and all the things there? That's absolutely a factor. As for Wilson is more of, now, granted, Utah may be willing to draw more quarterback runs just because of the success that Kansas State had with it. But I do think you're going to see more of it's just like, hey, no one's open downfield. Oh, look at this lane. I'm going to scramble and take off. That's what you'll have to be weary of. And that's what's so often, right? Defenses do their job. And what breaks them? It's a quarterback who can use his legs and scramble. And Wilson has the ability to do that. He's not as, Cam Rising was very good at picking his spots of when to run. So, maybe he doesn't pick those as well. As pocket presence is good. So that's where if the Wildcats can get home. And I thought Utah's offensive line played their best last week, and maybe they will continue to keep that up. But we're still waiting to see, like, week in and week out, like, are they going to be a dominant unit? I think they're going to continue to be really good, but they have against Utah State, they had a rough first quarter, got better after that, but that's just a matter of the situation. Against Baylor, they struggled to get the run going until late in that game where Micah Bernard kind of ripped that big one off. So that's where I do think if Arizona can lock in and do some things. You guys have one of our former defensive ends as well, Chase Kennedy, getting the opportunity to come back to Salt Lake City. So we'll see if he gets the opportunity to get on the field. And I do want to say one thing really quick about last year's matchup. It's such a different Utah team to me. I think by the time that game hit last year, Utah was dealing with a lot of injuries on the defensive side of the ball. They were down 3 of their best 4 players. The Cam Rising saga had really wore on. And I do feel like this offensive line, even though I mentioned how they've had moments of weakness, I think overall they're better than last year's offensive line too. It just feels like a totally different Utah team than the one last year. And a lot of those players who were coming back from like Brant Keithy wasn't on the field last year. He's one of the best tight ends in college football. Dorian Singer's emergence. He was fantastic last week. Those are the difference makers that Utah's done a good job adding on top of some key returners that I feel like this team is really well poised to be the team we expected Utah to be last year, in the thick of the Pac-12 race. When Cam got hurt, they were never going to be able to do that. This year, Cam is hurt, but some of the other pieces have stepped up there, and now it feels like Utah is still in the driver's seat as the team to beat in the Big 12.
Well, you just mentioned Brent Keithy, and then also Dorian Singer. Dorian Singer, obviously, for those who don't know, you must be living under a rock, especially if you're an Arizona Wildcats fan. Former wide receiver of the Arizona Wildcats, transferred over to Utah. I know that he's probably had this circled on his calendar. He didn't start off very fast, but last week changed a little bit. 7 catches, 95 yards. That'll do it for you. And he very much looked like every bit of the legitimate wide receiver that he showed when he was here at U of A. I'm very interested to see that. But Brent Keithy, let's go back to him for a second. I do think that he's one of those guys that you guys use in a variety of different ways. We saw him in the Wildcat formation last week on the goal line to score that touchdown. Had a couple of opportunities to grab some passes. He's a very versatile guy, and I agree with you. I think he is one of the best tight ends in the country. It's going to be a very difficult matchup for Arizona when it comes to that individual.
He's really talented. He's an electric route runner. He's got good hands. He's hard to bring down after the catch too. And you know what's weird about Utah? Or not weird, but just interesting. They're deep at tight end. Against Utah State a few weeks ago, they targeted 6 tight ends. They have a lot of different guys they can go to. One of those being Caleb Lohner, who's a former basketball player who was at Baylor and BYU before that. And it's kind of like, well, I didn't think he was even going to contribute. He's caught 2 touchdowns because he's just an awesome fade target. He can just jump up there and get it and leap over everyone. So Utah's a strong stable at tight ends. And even as good as Dorian Singer's been, he's been really good. He had catches last week, caught one behind his helmet. It was wild. He had one where he was just throwing guys off him, like dragging defenders. He was a man on a mission last week. And I do love the energy and the fire he plays with. He'll be good. He'll be fired up for this one. Brant Kuithe is still the best pass catcher on Utah's team. And I do think he's done a good job leading this offense. He can create the separation where when you have a backup quarterback who's going to miss throws, make mistakes, that, hey, he's going to get open enough times where you're going to be able to overcome those misses because you have guys like Singer and Kuithe who can win. Kuithe he's a tough player. And if you don't keep him in check, he's one that can really hurt you. Southern Utah game to start his season, hit 3 touchdowns of his 4 catches in that contest. So got to keep him in check. There's a couple of players on this Utah team, Singer, Kuithe, and Mackay. Those are really the 3 key offensive skill position guys you got to watch out for because all of them, Kuithe and Singer have more so been making the catches in the big spots. And then we mentioned Mackay just statistically. Mackay Bernard has been with Utah since 2021 actually. He is 100 yards away from the most rushing yards he's ever had in a college football season, and he's just starting the season. So this is a Utah team is playing some good football right now, even without Cam Rising.
That's wild. Before you go, always like to ask these 2 questions. Arizona wins if.
Okay. Oh, Arizona wins if Isaac Wilson turns it over and Noah Fafita and Tetairoa McMillan have Heisman type performances.
And then Utah wins if.
I think Utah wins if they control the line of scrimmage, make Noah Fafita uncomfortable, and really dominate the time of possession and keep those 2 players off the field.
All right. That's JT Wistrcill. Tell them where they can find you, JT.
Yeah, Locked On Utes, available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube as well. You can follow me on X at JT Wistrcill. Also, lots of Utah stuff as Locked On Utes runs Monday through Friday. So we keep it up very frequently. This is a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us. And that's Know Your Foe for this week, folks. Until next time, peace.
We all silly like the mayor.